presentation featuring SAP's predictive analytics solution, InfiniteInsight. It's great to have you with us. I'm Lori Blanford, the Marketing Manager at Done Solutions Group, and today's presenter is Jose Hernandez, our Director of Business Intelligence, and many of you know Jose from previous webinars. Today's presentation will be recorded, and the link will be shared with you sometime next week. All of our webinars are recorded and available on demand on our website, donesolutions.com, so please feel free at any point to take a visit and see if there are any other presentations that you may have an interest in viewing. Okay, let's take a look. Jumping ahead there. At today's agenda, I'm going to deliver a very brief introduction to Done Solutions Group, and then I'll turn it over to Jose, and he's going to dive into predictive analytics, first with an introduction, and then an introduction to the tool, SAP's InfiniteInsight. He'll provide a demo of that, and then wrap it up. Jose has expressed a preference to answer any questions that you may have during today's presentation afterwards via email, so please do submit them. Although we probably won't have time to answer any of them, we will follow up with an email. Okay, so I'll begin with an introduction to Done Solutions Group. We were founded over 25 years ago, and we're a full-service IT consulting firm. We design, deliver, and develop a wide range of solutions using a variety of advanced tools with offices in Chicago, Minneapolis, Raleigh, and Bangalore, India. Our offerings fall into three practice areas: application development solutions, and these include custom app development, mobile app development, e-commerce, portals, and web design; business intelligence solutions. These include end-to-end BI solutions, dashboards, reporting and analytics, mobility, and other advanced BI capabilities; and also packaged solutions, and these are custom software or services offerings for specific vertical markets or unique needs. In addition, we do offer training solutions that include classroom, virtual, on-site, and customized training programs. Our clients, many of which you can see here, include some of the biggest names in American business, mid-market companies, as well as a large number of government agencies and nonprofits. And in order to offer our clients the most advanced technologies possible, we maintain close partnerships with industry-leading technology companies, including Microsoft, IBM, and SAP. We offer end-to-end BI services, which I mentioned earlier, and those are detailed here. We are an SAP Gold partner and have been a top-level partner for over 18 years now. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we are a training partner. We are an authorized training partner for SAP, and we have training centers in Raleigh, Minneapolis, and St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, at this point, I am going to hand the presentation over to Jose. Again, welcome to everyone. We do encourage you to submit any questions that you may have, and a reminder that today's presentation will be recorded, and we will be sharing the link to the recording sometime next week. So at this point, let me turn it over to Jose and make him the presenter. All right, there we go.
All right, Lori, can you hear me?
I can. Excellent. Hi, Jose.
Very good, very good. And can you see my screen, more importantly?
Yes. Yes, we can.
All right, very good.
Good
afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, Lori.
Oh, I was just saying, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, this at least gives a flavor of my, my social virtual presence. And you have a sense for who the voice is behind the speaker here. I'm the Director of Business Intelligence for Done Solutions Group. We've done a variety of series of presentations from data warehousing to business intelligence with the SAP BI Suite and a variety of other topics. So I want to kick off a new series on predictive analytics. And this is the teaser presentation, we'll say. It's one that kind of introduces, so what is this predictive analytics stuff that we're talking about, and how does it tie into some of the other technologies that we are involved with. So I wanted to do it by kind of setting the stage in terms of business intelligence and things that you've seen me talk about in the past. So we are a strong promoter and supporter of SAP's BI Suite of tools, and these are tools that we give. Basically, we provide the ability for what I'll call regular people, non-IT people, to have access to information that's sitting within their organization. And these tools, there's a variety of tools that they can use to do that, from dashboards through ad hoc query and analysis and some exploration, as well as mobile devices. There is a thing that all these tools have in common, and when we look at traditional business intelligence, what I've talked about up until this point is what I'll call the ability to take a look in the rear view mirror and basically see what has happened and potentially respond to what has happened. And with traditional data warehousing and looking at all that historical data, that's what we've been able to do. Whether it's been dealing with standard reports or going after raw prepared data in a data warehouse, it's always been a historical view of the world. And there's a lot you can do with that. It's not to say that that's not valuable. But when we talk about predictive analytics, we're still talking about business intelligence, but now, besides looking in the rear view mirror, what we would have the ability to do is get a sense of what's approaching, what's ahead. And if you look at the analogy that I made here with that rear view mirror, it's like kind of having a navigation system in your car. It's kind of giving you insight into what's coming up and how you should react or where you should go. By the way, as a side note, this is actually an image of a real product that I stumbled upon. The URL is at the bottom of the slide if anyone is interested in. It is the rear view mirror with built-in navigation. So for anyone who's interested in this particular product, I provided the link for that as well. I'm going to be looking into it. So let's talk about predictive analytics. Instead of sensing and responding to information, we now would have the ability to predict and act. So not only could we ask the question, hey, what happened, or even be able to answer the question, why did this thing happen, we would now be able to say, hey, what's going to happen, and what are the possible outcomes, and what should I do? This is a very powerful thing. So with predictive analytics, toss that onto what we've called our traditional business intelligence, we have the ability to see what's behind us as well as what's coming up in front of us as well. Very powerful situation to be in. And that introduction or that setting the stage is really all about setting the stage for SAP InfiniteInsight. Towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk about another product as well. There are two products right now you may be aware of. There's SAP Predictive Analysis and there's SAP InfiniteInsight. I have a slide that I got from SAP that talks about the roadmap of how these two products are going to eventually merge together. I guess the best way to describe it, or the best way to introduce it now, is that InfiniteInsight is really, really powerful and strong at helping us build those predictive models, while SAP's predictive analysis gives us the ability to view the information that we've predicted in a very compelling and sexy way. Both these tools have the ability to do what the other one does. It's just that the strength in InfiniteInsight is in developing these models, and the strength in predictive analysis is the visualization and sharing of information from the models that we create. So in time, these two products will merge into one, and I've got a little roadmap slide that talks about that. Today's focus, though, is going to be on InfiniteInsight because I want to look at the tool that helps us with building these predictive models. All right, so if we look at analytics in general, analytics could be broken up into two major components, data analytics, which is our traditional BI that we've been talking about, and predictive analytics, so the rearview mirror and looking forward. When we look at predictive analytics, that can be further broken up into what I'll call the traditional statistical packages that are out there, and you've heard of some of them, SAS, SPSS, and R, and there's quite a few others. And then there's another grouping, the statistical data mining packages, which is where InfiniteInsight falls into. And if you look at those two different types of predictive analytics, when we talk about the traditional data, the traditional statistical packages, we're really talking about tools that are used by data scientists, basically people usually with PhDs in statistics and predictive analytics, and there's a science behind the magic, and so these folks know how to do that. And when we look at those packages, we're talking about dealing with making predictive models based on usually between 20 and 50 variables, so in the ones and tens counts of variables. When we look at tools under statistical data mining, such as InfiniteInsight, these are tools that are capable of dealing with not just hundreds, but thousands of variables at the same time. And we're going to talk a little bit about, why that's an issue or why that's the case. And so obviously, if you can deal with thousands of variables at the same time, you should be able to build even more powerful models than you could with just looking at a few variables. It's often difficult to tell what the predictive variables are within a model that you're trying to build. What is that component? What is that attribute that's helping you predict what the outcome is going to be? It's very challenging, and that's why these data scientists are special, are rare, and are expensive, and that's part of the challenge that we have. There's one thing I want to say. Oftentimes you'll hear big data being tossed around, and in terms of big data, it's usually big data means a lot of things to a lot of people. One of the obvious things is lots of data, and usually that lots of data came as a result of many of the social media and that's available out there, and the web experiences that's available out there. But when we talk about big data in terms of predictive analytics, it's not necessarily focusing on how much data there is, but how many columns of data or how many attributes of data we have. And so tools like InfiniteInsight can deal with big data in terms of many, many variables because it can handle thousands of variables at the same time. All right, so before we dive into tools and all that, I thought we would first take a look at, how is predictive analytics used today, and what are the various categories of things that people in business do with predictive analytics. And I'm sure that many of you that are out there have dealt with these things, and they fall into, well, I've grouped them into 4 major categories under CRM, risk, operations, and fraud, and you can see some examples of what those things are. So in terms of CRM, I want to manage my customer base. Part of what I want to do with predictive analytics is determine, hey, am I going to lose a customer? It's called customer churn. And so one of the things that I want to do is make sure that I can detect when somebody is going to leave me in terms of being a client. This is called churn, and in essence what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out when is somebody acting like somebody who left. And so when we talk about customer churn, we want to try to predict when somebody is acting like someone who left, and then do something about it so that they don't leave. Maybe make them a special offer. It could be for customer retention. It could be simply for meeting price. But the whole point is identifying those folks before they leave, because it's really expensive to get new customers, and you don't want them to leave. That's a very obvious one. There's other things that I want to do in terms of CRM. I may, when somebody's shopping, if I'm involved in, if I have a web presence for my store, I may want the opportunity to cross or upsell them. But I want to know what the appropriate thing is to put in front of them so that they're not getting annoyed with my trying to upsell or cross-sell them. I'm actually presenting them with products or deals that they may be interested in. So that's something that predictive analytics can help me with. In terms of risk, if I'm going to give someone a loan, I want to do things. I want to find out, well, let me do some credit scoring. And so predictive analytics is used for that as well. I may also want to determine how to predict where crime or terrorism could potentially happen, and get to it before it does happen, or at least be aware of when these things potentially could arise. If I look at operations, there's a variety of things I do. One of my favorites is KPI forecasting. Basically, if I have a key performance indicator and I want to know what's going to happen to that key performance indicator in the future, I could do some predictive analytics in order to determine that. Another example during operations is maybe pricing optimization. What is the right price for this product? and so that I can make sure that I maximize my revenue by having that price be such that people will buy it, and lots of people will buy it, and I'm charging as much as I possibly can to maximize that. In addition, I have my last category is fraud detection, and we use predictive analytics for fraud detection. Things like credit card fraud, like there's a fraudulent transaction that's happening on a particular credit card. It's good to determine if that's the case. Maybe insurance fraud, online gaming fraud. It's basically when is somebody doing some kind of transaction that that looks suspicious, and try to detect when that occurs. So these are some of the things that predictive analytics and data mining help us with, just to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about. And some of you, I suspect, are dealing with these things and probably have some predictive models in place today to take care of some of these. All right, let me take a breath here, because that was quite a mouthful. I want to take a look at traditional statistical techniques, or how is data mining and predictive analytics, how is that done today? And today, there is a process that's followed in order to do this. It's made up of a series of steps, and these steps, when you look at the whole process overall, it's a long process and potentially expensive process. It typically takes several weeks, if not months, to develop a predictive model, and then ultimately you get the payoff of what that predictive model is. And usually the folks that build these predictive models are specialized, very expensive people. So combine the fact that that it takes a considerably a good amount of time to do this, and that it's very expensive to do this. Today, I shouldn't say today, traditionally it's been the case that you don't build as many models as you actually need. You build models where you think it's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. So you may not be taking advantage of opportunities that arise that you would use that you would be able to benefit from a predictive model, simply because of how expensive it is and how long it takes to do. It's not unreasonable for a model that for it to cost between $80,000 and $100,000 to build one of these models. Well, obviously, if that's how much the outlay is to build one of these models, you have to consider that when you're going to define one. Is the payoff at the end worth the $80,000 to $100,000 to build this particular model? So what's involved in this process? One of the first things that has to happen is, hey, you have to select variables. Remember, I mentioned that typically we're selecting between 20 and 50 variables, and which are the right variables to select? Well, we take educated guesses, and that's why it's important to have these folks that know what they're doing. Take educated guesses of what these variables are, and then when you've identified those variables, the next thing that you want to do is you want to prepare your data so that you can try to build these models. And the interesting part is that preparation of data is what takes a big chunk of the time. And you have to do things like deal with outliers, you have to deal with missing data. There's a whole variety of things that you have to contend with to prepare this data. And I didn't even mention the acquisition of this data, but that's in there too. So once you've prepared the data, you go ahead and you build a model that you believe is going to work. And oftentimes, based on past experiences, you decide, hey, this looks like, you find the pattern that's appropriate, and you use a particular algorithm to build this model. And once you've done that, you go ahead and you test your model and see how that model behaves. Interesting thing, the way that these models are tested, you basically start out with a data set of the known outcome, and you take a component of that data set and move it aside. You put it on the side, and you take the remainder of that data and you use that to generate or create your model. Then you run your model against the data that's off to the side and see how well it performs. And so you basically do that, and typically it takes several iterations to get that right. And you're going back, maybe you're reselecting variables, or maybe preparing more data, you're building the model, you're testing it again, until you get to the point where you have a model that appears to work. Then you can go ahead and run your data through that model, understand what's going on, and apply the outcome of that model to your business process. So it's an involved process, but one that pays off in the end. So the idea behind InfiniteInsight is, can I shorten that process? Can I make it easier such that instead of taking weeks to develop one of these models, I can build models in hours or days. So if that were the case, if I could do that, that would be very beneficial because, number one, obviously time is money, and if I can do these things that much faster, I could build more models than I used to. So if we could do this, we'd be able to handle the growing demand of models. Hey, if you've got a bunch of products and you want to have some marketing campaigns around these products, you are going to have to build a model for each one of these things and the various permutations of these things. Well, that would be very expensive unless I could shrink down that development cycle considerably. And also, if I can shrink down that development process, I could spend more time understanding and applying the outcomes of my model. So I can build more models. I can spend more time doing the highly effective parts of this process. So it sounds like a great idea. One might say it sounds like I'm selling snake oil, but it's not the case. So how is this all possible? InfiniteInsight takes a slightly different approach to building these models. Instead of taking an approach of using algorithms or looking at it from the maximizing my likelihood scenarios, it's an alternative way of looking at the world. So it's called structural risk minimization, SRM for short. And using this approach, which has been coded into the product itself, using this approach, I'm able to let the computer do this work that used to be done by the human. Obviously, computers can do things faster. They can do more trial and error than a human can do in the same amount of time. And so what does this structural risk minimization allow me to do? Well, it allows me to automate some of the variable selection, some of the data preparation, variable encoding, dealing with missing values or outliers, binding and banding of groups of numbers, and testing the model. So if I could let the software do all this stuff and I can shrink that process, that means I could deal with more models, more variables, and shorter time span. If you want to learn more about SRM, I've provided this slide. I'm not going to talk about Vladimir, except that he's relatively controversial, Vladimir, and some of the theories around structural risk minimization. But I've provided some links here and some information so you can go Google them to your heart's content and find out a little bit more about this. Now, I want to pause here for a second because I don't want you to think that I'm saying we don't need data scientists. We don't need these guys that are what I'll call the artisans of predictive analytics. What I'm trying to say is that they are not the only ones that can take advantage of or create predictive models. With tools like InfiniteInsight, I can, it's kind of like the DIYers now. There's a lot of do-it-yourself projects that people could do that were usually left to the professionals. But such is the case here now where I have tools that allow me to dabble into this. Obviously, the better you are at math, the better you are at statistics, the more effective you can be. And there are situations and times where I do want the assistance of my data scientists to help me out with certain things. And the tweaking of these models and so on, that's where I'm going to go. But I can now build more models that do a really, really good job of predicting as opposed to just having one or two models that do a really good job of predicting. So that's kind of the concept, that's the idea behind this tool. All right, so now that I've said all that and I come back to my slide about what is data mining and predictive analytics, I want to focus on one example here that I'm going to try to use InfiniteInsight to focus on. And so I decided KPI forecasting might be a good example that I can use. Before I dive into that, there are some terminologies and some things that we do have to learn. By all means, I'm doing a time check here. Good, I'm good on time. I want to introduce you to some of these things. So there's a variety of different types of algorithms that I can use, and what I want to focus on is regression and classification analysis and what that means. And basically, regression and classification analysis are techniques that I can use to analyze relationships between variables and predictors. So my dependent variable, my target variable, is the thing that I'm trying to predict. And these other independent variables are the variables that I will use as things that could predict what that outcome is. And when I'm doing this, there's two categories that I'm talking about here. It's regression analysis and classification analysis. Regression analysis, and some of you know about linear regression, it's that concept. It's basically the ability to predict what a value is going to be against a continuous variable. So it's a continuous, think about a number line. It's any number of outcomes. And so what I'm trying to do is determine, for example, how big is something going to be? How much is something going to be? I would do regression analysis. Classification analysis is a little bit different. Classification analysis says I've got a binary outcome, usually true or false, 0 or 1, and I'm going to try to determine for a particular variable what that outcome is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and predict it. Is it going to be true? Is it going to be false? Or is it 1 or 0, or whatever the case might be? And so these are two types of analysis that I can do with InfiniteInsight, among others. But I wanted to introduce these two because they're going to play a role in the demonstration that I'm going to do. I have fictitious data for a fictitious scenario. So this is not real, but that's okay. I can go ahead and do prediction on fictitious data. So let me set the scenario here. What I'd like to do is, let's say I have a dealership, a car dealership, and I've got this new model coming out, and I want to market this new model to a certain segment of my customer base. And one of the things that I've determined is that this model is well suited for folks making over $50,000 a year. So I've got this collection of, I've got this demographic information on my customers, and what I want to do is see if there's a way that I can create a predictive model that will tell me if someone is likely to make more than $50,000 a year. Okay. The sample data set that I have is relatively small, and it does not have a lot of variables, but it's good for this demonstration. I've got about 16 columns of data about some demographic information across 48,000 fake people. And in this particular data set, I happen to know that 24% of this sample data set are folks that do earn over $50,000. $50,000 a year. So here's the idea. I have a known data set, which I'm going to try to build a predictive model on. Then I'm going to take that predictive model, and I'll be able to run unknown data sets that I have the similar columns for, and try to use that model to predict whether they make $50,000 or more. Because the idea is, I really only want to market this thing to the high probability consumers. And that's what I'm shooting for. I guess I could send material to everyone, but that would be very expensive. And I also may annoy other customers that are getting material for things that they won't care about, or they're not in the ballpark of being able to afford. So I certainly don't want to do that. All right. So let me switch over. Here we go. So what I have here is InfiniteInsight, and it comes. There's a variety of modules that come with it. We're going to focus on the modeler for this demonstration. I just want to give you a taste of this particular tool. What I said I wanted to do for this particular example is to create a classification and regression model. InfiniteInsight is based on a series of modules. Depending on what you're licensed for, you get various modules here. And the modules do a variety of things. For example, the Explorer module, not to be confused with BI Explorer, but the Explorer module allows me to get and pre-process data sets so that I can use for creating these modules. There's a whole series of tools around that. The modeler is the thing that lets me create the model. So let's go ahead and create that classification regression model. And I can go ahead and I can use data sets that I've prepared in Explorer, so I can click on that and go grab it from that Explorer module I just talked about, or I can go ahead and grab that data set from tables in the database or text files or so on. So if you drop this down, these are various choices of things that I have: text files and database and flat memory. The sample data set that I have is a text file in a particular folder. and I'm going to go ahead and grab that. So let me browse for my sample data set. There it is, my Census 1 data set. Now, this just says, hey, go find it there, and once I find it there, I could actually take a peek at it. And I can open this up here and I can look at my data set. And one of the things that I'll notice in here in my data set is that I got a sample of, I'm looking at about 100 of these rows, and I can basically do a little exploration. What have I gotten here? What kind of data? What are the various values? And you can see each one of these columns are one of those attributes or one of those variables that I have in here. And normally in the traditional approach, I would have to come in here and say, well, what do I think are predictors? I don't necessarily want to bring in the traditional approach, 1,000 variables and try to deal with that. It's overwhelming. But with InfiniteInsight, I can do that, and it's going to take care of figuring out which one are the appropriate variables. I'll show you that in a second. The cutting strategy over here, remember I explained that in the process, one of the things that you do is you take your data set of known data, you split it up, and you take some of it and put it to the side. That's what you're going to use to test your model. So what I can do here is I can define the cutting strategy. I'm going to leave it at the default level, but I can come in here and I can decide, well, how is that data going to be split? Is it randomly? I'm going to take 10%. Whatever the case might be, there are options that I can set here. I'm going to leave it as default for the moment. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm ready to go to the next step. So in the next step, what I have to do is describe or tell InfiniteInsight about this data that I've just grabbed. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the Analyze button here. And the Analyze button is going to go out there and say, hey, I found this data set. It's got these various columns. And I took a guess, not me actually, InfiniteInsight did, took a guess at what are the different data types and is the value, is it a continuous value, a nominal value, an ordinal value? These are important things to know about the data. So if it's not exactly right, if the educated guess is a little bit wrong, for example, age, I don't want it to be an integer, I really want that to be a number, it is continuous, and so on and so forth, I can come through here and change these definitions that it took an educated guess on. By the way, once I've done this with this particular data set and I've gone ahead and defined what these are, I can go ahead and save that description so that if I bring in similar data again to run through the model, I can apply that description. In fact, I have already done that, and I have a description file here. So I can apply the description file, and then all the settings that I had done before, they're all set, and I'm ready to go. I believe that's all I wanted to talk about here. I can go back and view my data some more from this screen as well if I needed to, but I'm ready to go to the next step. And then the next step, what I'm presented with here is, here's all the variables that were discovered in the data set. Some of those variables are going to be the target variable. Class is going to be my target variable. That's going to have a 0 or 1. If they make over $50,000, it's going to have a 1 in it, and if they make less, it's going to have a 0 in it. So that just happens to be the name of that variable. And anything that I want to exclude, variables that I don't want to consider, I would move into here. For example, let's say I had phone number in here, and it's highly unlikely that phone number is really significant or meaningful in this. I could exclude the phone number variable if I wanted to. If I'm not sure, I don't have to exclude any variables. And if there's any kind of weighing that I want to do with any variables, I can associate that here in the weighted variables. I'm going to keep it nice and simple. I'm going to leave it all as the default settings here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. The next screen gives me a summary of my model parameters. I can give the model a specific name if I wanted to here, and it's always a good idea to give this thing a description. And then a variety of other fields that says, hey, where's the data file stored right now? Where's the data description file stored? Just some high-level information about my model. I can hit the Advanced button here, and depending on what type of model I'm building, the Advanced button gives me the ability to tweak and fine-tune some of the parameters for the various, depending on the model that I'm building. I'm going to leave all these as default, but this is a situation where someone that knows a little bit about statistics or those data scientists can play a role here in terms of like, well, let's tweak this the way that these models and these numbers are going to be calculated. And they can come in here and make the adjustments in these parameters. I'm going to leave those all as default. And I believe I'm ready to go. When I click this button here, InfiniteInsight is going to take that data set and it's going to iterate through, actually, let me go ahead and do it, and I'll talk while it's happening. It's going to iterate through here, and it's going to test and try different models and different variables until it comes up with what we'll call a champion model, the model that seems to do a really, really good job of predicting. So it should take a few seconds here. And this is the stuff, what it's doing here now is the stuff that takes a long time to do the traditional way. So I'm done here. It says, all right, little overview about the model that I just created. I started out with 16 variables. Of those 16, 14 were selected for consideration. This is how many records I had in here as well. The learning time to build this model was 18 seconds. That's cool. Class was the variable that I was shooting for, so I had one target variable. By the way, I didn't mention it, but I'm not limited to one target variable. If I want to try to predict other variables as well, I can include those into the target variables, and it would build models for those as well. It says here that it found 76%, 76% of my data were no, they don't make $50,000, and almost 24%, like I knew my sample data set was, do make $50,000 a year or more. That's very cool. So it took 4 iterations to try to do that. These two, KI and KR, are two indexes that tell me the how good the model is and how robust and versatile the model is. So these are two nice high numbers, and it used 7 of those variables in order to make these predictions. So of the 14 variables that I did select, 7 of them were high predictors. That's pretty cool. Let's take a look and see what we got going on here. So once I've created this model, there's a variety of things I can do. I can take a look at some information about what the model determined. I could go ahead and run that model, or I can save and export that model. So if I wanted to run the model, I could simply choose Apply Model, for example. If I have a data set that I want to run through here, Apply Model. I don't have a data set, but I'll show you what happens here. I take my application data set, and I say, well, where do I want it to end up in? And then I do some mapping once I've defined an application data set, and I make sure the columns are mapped. It usually does a really nice job of detecting the column mappings, and in theory, the structure of the columns would be very similar to what I use to teach, to prepare or train the model. And so it does a fine job of doing that, but I can tweak the mapping of those. And once I've done that and determined a target, I can go ahead and apply it, and it would run through that data set and provide the predictive outcomes. So that's one way that I can apply the model. The other thing I can do is I could go ahead and I can take this model and generate source code. So one of the really neat things that InfiniteInsight can do for me is create code that can run on a database server like Oracle or SQL Server or HANA. And what happens is it takes this model and generates stored procedure code to execute the model on the database server. Think about it. If the data's sitting on a database server and there's lots of data I want to go through, why should I move my data from where the data lives and bring it into a tool to then run the model on? If the data's already there, I can take this model, pump the source code into that, the origins of the data, and run it right there without having to move the data. So that's really powerful. The other thing that I can do is I can export in its own scripting language a script here so that I could modify the script and run this model and tweak the script using its built-in scripting language. What I want to do, and I kind of ran through here real quick some of the mechanics here, but I just built the model, and it determined that 7 variables were variables that were high predictors. I think it would be pretty cool to kind of see what those variables were. So I'm going to take a look at the contributions by variables here. And you can see these are the 7 variables, and they're ordered in how much influence they had or how much they contributed to being able to predict. And marital status was a high predictor. In fact, it was the highest one. I can double-click on this line, and it's going to show me, hey, of the various marital statuses, we can see that somebody that was married has a much higher probability of making $50,000 than people that were divorced or single or never married. That's one example. I also have other, for example, age. I'm going to show you age for a second because this is kind of neat. Under age, even though it's a lower predictor, I can come in here and I can take a look at how age influences things. So people between 42 and 62 years of age, that was a very high influencer in terms of being able to predict this number. The interesting thing about this is that the software basically, oh gosh, I have a mental block on the word. Well, it pinned the ages for me. So each person had a particular age, but it figured out what the appropriate grouping or binning was for the age groups and figured that out for me. And so that's how it came out with these age ranges here in order to do the prediction. So that's kind of neat. I can see that age plays a role in this as well. Now, all right, that's kind of neat. So I've got a model. I took a look at the variables that play a role in being able to predict this outcome. And one of the things I may want to do now, oh, I didn't show you this. I'm sorry to jump around here. Any one of these charts that I'm looking at here, I can go ahead and export those to Excel so that I can share that information. And I wanted to show you this and mention it specifically because down the road in that roadmap, part of what's going to happen here is that the visualizations that you see here are going to be taken care of by Predictive Analysis, the other SAP tool. So as these two products merge together, the visualization component of Predictive Analysis is going to be used to do these visualizations, while the model generating components of InfiniteInsight are going to handle the creation of these models. So it's a nice little marriage of capabilities between the two. All right, so finally I want to show you one last thing here, the model overview. Because in the model overview, I'm going to have to, so I create this model and I've got to convince people that, hey, this is what we should do. From here, I can generate automatically a nice little PowerPoint slide, which tells me information about this model. And one of the neat things that, that the model tells me is that, hey, I can target a certain percentage of the population here and get high impact without having to target the entire population. This line here represents a random approach to sending marketing material, for example, to these people. My model says that, for example, at 30% of my population, if I target 30% of the population, I'm going to get almost a 75% hit on people that make over $50,000 and might be interested in here. So I don't have to send this material to everyone. I could potentially focus on just that 30% where I get a nice little payoff without spending as much money on my marketing campaign. So that's the kind of stuff that the model is capable of doing for you. This overview slide tells you what the variables were and how they participated and information about the target population and the eligible population. So it's a nice little summary as to, like, here's what the model can do for you. And simply by clicking a button, you can get this PowerPoint. Then tweak it to your heart's content if you like. Let me close that real quick. And I know that I just scratched the surface, and it's a sliver of what this particular tool does, but I wanted to at least show you the kind of thing that InfiniteInsight can do for you. There are many nooks and crannies here that you can take advantage of, but you saw how easy it was for me to build a predictive model, and I promise you I do not have a degree in statistics. I'm a computer science guy, so I'm aware of data, and I love data, but certainly a tool like this will allow me to build predictive models that I can be confident in and take advantage of. So that said, want a real quick review. So InfiniteInsight, what are some of the benefits of a tool like this? And it's productivity. The fact that I can automate through software, I can do work that usually took weeks in a matter of hours or minutes. It's my lower total cost of ownership. I can leverage existing infrastructure. I get payback for the models that I build, in weeks instead of months. I can use existing resources. I want to stress again that I'm not saying that we're replacing data scientists. There is a time, a place, and a need for data scientists. There aren't enough of them, and there isn't enough time to build all the models that we want to build, but some models need the expertise of these data scientists. But many models do not, and a tool like this will allow me to generate those models and create many, many models and do predictive where I would never even consider creating predictive models, but I can now. And so really, in terms of, there are quite a few benefits to doing this. And if you have any predictive projects that you're considering doing and you don't have a data scientist, this is something that you should seriously consider. And even if you do have data scientists, imagine putting a tool like this in their hands where they can create many, many models and refine it and verify them much faster than they could before. They may even appreciate that. So I wanted to make quick mention here that I did say that there are two products in SAP Suite of Tools around predictive analysis. One's called Predictive Analysis, and the other one is InfiniteInsight that we just took a peek at. In the roadmap, these two products will be merging together, and the idea is that there will be one product in the end. My roadmap, by the way, that I have doesn't go beyond 2014 and much beyond this quarter. And obviously, I'm not SAP, so I don't control what the timing really is. SAP will determine this. But this is their roadmap. This is what they intend to do. This slide is from Q1. I do not have an updated slide in terms of the roadmap, but this is the direction they're going. The timing might not be right based on this slide, so it's a little bit dated, but certainly the direction and the approach is what they are trying to do. Let me check here. All right, looking good. All right. So when I first started, I said that I wanted this to be the teaser presentation for a series of presentations on predictive analysis, and I just wanted to give you a sense of some of these tools that are available to us today, so that we can marry the BI tools that we're familiar with from SAP and with some of these new predictive tools. And what I'd like to do over the next few webinars is dive a little bit deeper into, well, how do we marry these products together, and what's the workflow, and how might some of these things be used, so that I can create a predictive model, run some data through it, and then somebody with Lumira or Explorer can go ahead and visualize that predicted data. That's when it starts becoming really powerful. But I now have the ability to do that because I now have in my hands the ability to create predictive models that will work. And that was the goal today. Hopefully this will whet your appetite in terms of being able to do predictive analytics within your next BI project. And stay tuned for the upcoming webinars around InfiniteInsight and predictive analytics, where we start marrying the BI tools along with these predictive tools and see the kinds of things that we can do. I certainly want to thank you all for your time this afternoon. It looks like I squeezed in just in time, so that was pretty good timing. You all have a good weekend, and look forward to the next presentation. So long, everyone.